I should have known something was wrong when Lillian insisted on planning my 64th birthday party. In the 3 years since Charlie married her, she had never shown the slightest interest in celebrating anything related to me. But there she was, 2 weeks before my birthday, standing in my kitchen with her perfectly manicured nails tapping against my counter, telling me she wanted to do something special for the old man. Please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what city you're watching from. The party was held at Charlie's house, which used to be our family home before I moved to the smaller place after Martha passed. Seeing our old dining room filled with people I barely recognized felt strange. Lillian had invited her friends, people from Charlie's work, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. The few family friends who actually knew me seemed lost among the crowd of strangers. I sat in the corner, watching Lillian play the perfect daughter-in-law. She wore a bright yellow dress that cost more than my monthly pension, her smile never wavering as she accepted compliments about what a wonderful job she was doing taking care of Charlie's father. Every few minutes she would glance in my direction with that look, the one that said I was nothing more than an obligation she had to endure. Charlie moved through the party like he was campaigning for office, shaking hands and laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. When people asked about his father, he would gesture vaguely in my direction and change the subject. 3 years ago, my son used to seek out my advice about everything from work problems to weekend plans. Now he acted like I was furniture that happened to be breathing. The cake arrived around 7:30, an elaborate creation with way too much frosting and 64 candles that took forever to light. As everyone gathered around to sing happy birthday, I caught Lillian whispering something to her friend Sandra. They both looked at me and laughed quietly. The sound cut through the singing voices like glass breaking. After I blew out the candles, Lillian stepped forward with a wrapped box. "Ross, honey, we got you something really special," she announced, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used whenever other people were watching. The room fell quiet, all eyes on us. I opened the box carefully, aware that everyone was staring. Inside was a cheap digital watch, the kind you might find at a discount store. The price tag was still attached, $9.99. Lillian's smile grew wider as I held it up. "We thought you needed something to help you keep track of time," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "You know, since you've been getting so forgetful lately." The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as I forced myself to smile and nod. "Thank you," I managed to say. "It's very thoughtful." But Lillian wasn't finished. She placed her hand on my shoulder, her grip just tight enough to hurt. "We worry about you living alone, Ross. At your age with your memory issues, maybe it's time to consider other living arrangements, somewhere with more supervision." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. I saw several people nodding in agreement, their faces full of pity for the poor old man who couldn't take care of himself anymore. Charlie stood beside his wife saying nothing, his eyes focused on something over my head. "I managed just fine," I said quietly. Lillian's laugh was sharp and bright. "Oh, sweetie, you're as cheap as always, old man. Trying to save money by living in that tiny house when you clearly need help." She looked around the room, gathering support from the audience. "Just last week, he forgot to turn off his stove. Could have burned the whole neighborhood down." That was a lie. I had never left my stove on, never forgotten to lock my door, never wandered around confused like she was suggesting. But looking at the faces around me, I could see they believed her version of events. She had been building this narrative for months, apparently, turning me into a character in a story about declining old age and family burden. I glanced at Charlie, hoping for some sign of support, some indication that he knew his wife was lying. But he just stood there, nodding along with her performance, his expression carefully neutral. The party continued for another hour, but I felt invisible. People talked around me and over me, discussing my limitations and needs like I wasn't sitting right there. When it finally ended, I thanked everyone for coming and made my way to the door. Charlie walked me out to my car, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. For a moment, I thought he might say something, might acknowledge what had just happened. Instead, he patted my shoulder awkwardly and told me to drive safely. The drive home took only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept thinking about Lillian's smile when she called me cheap, the way the room had laughed at her suggestion about supervision, Charlie's silence through it all. By the time I pulled into my driveway, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something else, a cold, clear anger that I hadn't felt in years. I walked into my house and went straight to my bedroom, intending to change out of my good clothes and try to forget the whole evening. But as I opened my dresser drawer, my hand brushed against something I had forgotten was there. An envelope, sealed and yellowed with age, tucked beneath my winter sweaters. Martha's handwriting on the front read, "For Ross, only if you really need this." I sat on the edge of our old bed, holding the envelope with shaking hands. Martha had been gone for 5 years, but seeing her careful script brought back the sound of her voice, the way she used to worry about me being too trusting, too willing to let people take advantage of my good nature. "Promise me," she had said during one of our last conversations before the cancer took her. "Promise me you won't let anyone make you feel small after I'm gone. You're stronger than you think, Ross. Don't forget that." I opened the envelope carefully, my heart pounding. Inside was a folded letter and a small key I didn't recognize. The letter was dated just 6 months before Martha died. "My dearest Ross," it began, "if you're reading this, it means someone in our family has made you feel worthless or unwanted. I pray this day never comes, but I know how people can change when they think there's something to gain from an old man's weakness." My hands trembled as I continued reading. Martha had seen something coming, had prepared for a possibility I never would have imagined. The letter contained instructions, addresses, account numbers, details about something she had kept secret for 20 years. As I read, the humiliation of the evening began to transform into something else entirely. Martha had given me a weapon I never knew existed, a way to fight back against people who mistook kindness for weakness. But more than that, she had given me a choice. I could remain the victim of tonight's cruelty, or I could become something else entirely. I looked at the cheap watch still strapped to my wrist, its digital display blinking mockingly in the dim light of my bedroom. Tomorrow everything would begin to change. But first I needed to understand exactly what Martha had left for me and why she had hidden it for so long. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat at my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light, reading Martha's letter over and over again, trying to make sense of what she had done. The small key lay beside the papers, cold and mysterious in my palm. According to the letter, Martha had been secretly investing small amounts of our money for over 20 years. Not much at first, $20 here, $50 there, money she saved from careful grocery shopping and coupon clipping. She had put it all into stock of a small technology company called Innovate Solutions. "I researched them for months," her letter explained. "The founder reminded me of you. Honest, hard-working, determined to build something meaningful. I had a feeling they would succeed, but I never told you because I knew you would worry about the risk." The letter included account numbers, passwords, and the address of a safety deposit box downtown. The key in my hand would open that box, where Martha had stored all the documentation of her secret investment. "By the time you read this," the letter continued, "those stocks should be worth considerably more than we paid for them. I've kept track of the company's progress, and they've grown beyond anything I imagined. Use this money wisely, my love. Use it to protect yourself from people who might try to take advantage of your good heart." At 6 in the morning, I called the bank. They opened at 9, but I wanted to confirm that the safety deposit box was still active. The customer service representative checked my information and confirmed that box number 217 was registered under both Martha's and my names, with annual fees paid automatically from an account I never knew existed. I spent the morning pacing around my small house, my mind racing between disbelief and growing excitement. Martha had always been careful with money, but I never suspected she was capable of something this elaborate. She had kept this secret for decades, planning for a future where I might need protection from my own family. The bank was crowded when I arrived at 9:15, but I didn't care about waiting. I filled out the required forms and followed a bank employee to the safety deposit room in the basement. My hand shook as I inserted Martha's key into box 217. Inside was a manila folder thick with documents, stock certificates, quarterly reports, dividend statements, and a detailed notebook in Martha's handwriting, tracking every transaction she had made over 20 years. As I flipped through the pages, the numbers began to tell an incredible story. Martha had bought her first shares of Innovate Solutions in 1998 for $3 per share. She had purchased a total of 5,000 shares over the years, always in small increments, always with money she had saved through her careful household management. The most recent statement, dated just 6 months ago, showed the stock trading at $412 per share. I sat in the small viewing room, calculator in hand, doing the math 3 times to make sure I wasn't making a mistake. 5,000 shares at $412 each meant Martha's secret investment was now worth over $2 million. $2 million. I leaned back in the uncomfortable bank chair, stunned. While Lillian was calling me cheap and suggesting I needed supervision, while Charlie was allowing his wife to humiliate me publicly, I was sitting on a fortune that could change everything. But the folder contained more than just financial documents. Martha had also included several newspaper clippings about Innovate Solutions, tracking their growth from a small startup to a major technology firm. More importantly, she had included several articles about elder abuse and financial exploitation of older adults. Knowledge is power, she had written in the margins of one article. Know your rights, know your worth, and never let anyone convince you that age makes you helpless. The final document in the folder was a letter addressed to both Charlie and Lillian, sealed and marked, to be delivered only if Ross chooses to do so. I held the envelope up to the light, wondering what final message Martha had prepared for my son and his wife. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, my mind spinning with possibilities. For the first time since Martha's funeral, I felt powerful instead of pitiful. But along with the excitement came a cold, calculating anger that surprised me with its intensity. Lillian thought she was married to a wealthy man with a burden of a father. She had no idea that the burden she was so eager to dispose of was worth more than everything she and Charlie owned combined. The irony was almost perfect. While she was planning to put me away somewhere with more supervision, I had the resources to buy and sell her precious lifestyle 10 times over. That afternoon, I called Innovate Solutions directly. I wanted to understand exactly what Martha had given me and whether her assessment of the company's value was accurate. The Investor Relations Department connected me with a senior analyst who confirmed what the statement showed. The stock had been one of the best performers in the technology sector for the past 5 years. "Are you looking to sell?" the analyst asked. "I'm looking to understand," I replied. "My wife invested in your company 20 years ago, and I'm just now discovering what she accomplished." The analyst spent 20 minutes explaining the company's growth trajectory, their market position, and their prospects for continued success. By the end of the conversation, I understood that Martha hadn't just made a lucky guess. She had identified a company with genuine value and held onto her investment through market ups and downs, reinvesting dividends and building wealth methodically. That evening, I sat in my living room with Martha's folder spread across the coffee table. I thought about the past 3 years, watching Charlie become distant and cold, seeing Lillian's obvious contempt for my presence in their lives. I remembered a dozen small cruelties, moments when they had made me feel like a burden, an embarrassment, a problem to be solved. The cheap watch from my birthday party sat on the table beside Martha's documents, $9.99 versus $2 million. The contrast was almost funny, except that nothing about this situation felt humorous anymore. I picked up my phone and dialed Charlie's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice distracted. "Dad, is everything okay? I wanted to thank you again for the birthday party," I said carefully, "and the watch. It was very thoughtful." There was a pause. "Oh, right. Yeah, Lillian picked that out. She thought you'd like it. She mentioned something about me needing more supervision," I continued. "About other living arrangements. Has she discussed this with you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Dad, we're just concerned about you. Living alone at your age, with some of the things that have been happening." "What things, Charlie?" "You know, the forgetfulness, the confusion." Lillian's noticed some warning signs. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Martha's letter in my hand. My son believed his wife's lies about my mental state. Worse, he was actively participating in building a case against my independence. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, I should probably start making some plans then." "That's probably wise, Dad. Maybe we can look at some places together this weekend." After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, surrounded by the evidence of Martha's foresight and love. She had seen this coming somehow, had prepared for the day when our son would choose his wife's convenience over his father's dignity. Tomorrow I would begin to understand exactly how far Lillian and Charlie were willing to go to solve their Ross problem. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I had the tools to fight back. Martha had given me more than money. She had given me the power to choose my own fate and the resources to make sure that choice stuck. The question now was how to use that power wisely, and whether my son could be saved from his wife's influence before it was too late. I looked at the sealed letter addressed to Charlie and Lillian, wondering what Martha's final words to them would be. But first, I needed to know exactly what they were planning, and how long I had before they tried to take control of my life completely. The next morning, I drove to the public library downtown. At 74 years old, I wasn't exactly comfortable with internet research, but I needed to understand who my daughter-in-law really was. The librarian, a kind woman named Patricia, who remembered me from when I used to bring Charlie here as a child, helped me set up at one of the computers. "What are you researching today, Mr. Henderson?" she asked. "Family history," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. I started with Lillian's maiden name, Lillian Crawford. What I found in the first hour of searching made my blood run cold. There were 3 obituaries, spread across different states, all mentioning Lillian as a surviving spouse. The first was Robert Crawford, age 68, who died in Phoenix, Arizona in 2015. Heart attack, according to the obituary. Lillian had been married to him for 2 years. The second was James Morrison, age 71, who died in Denver, Colorado in 2017. Sudden cardiac episode, the newspaper reported. Lillian had been married to him for 18 months. The third was Donald Fletcher, age 69, who died in Sacramento, California in 2019. Another heart attack. Lillian had been married to him for just over a year. All 3 men had been wealthy widowers. All 3 had died suddenly of heart problems. All 3 had left Lillian as their primary beneficiary. I sat back in the library chair, my own heart pounding as the pattern became clear. Charlie wasn't Lillian's first wealthy husband. He was her 4th. And if the pattern held, he was in serious danger. I printed out the obituaries and continued searching. Property records showed that Lillian had inherited substantial assets from each husband. A house in Phoenix worth $400,000, a condo in Denver worth $600,000, a commercial property in Sacramento worth nearly $1 million. But the most disturbing discovery came when I searched for court records. In Sacramento, Donald Fletcher's daughter had contested his will, claiming that her father had been coerced or manipulated into changing his estate plan just weeks before his death. The case had been settled out of court, with Lillian paying the daughter $200,000 to drop the challenge. I asked Patricia to help me access newspaper archives from Sacramento. We found a brief article about the will contest that included a quote from Fletcher's daughter. "My father was healthy and sharp until he married that woman. Within 6 months, he was confused, forgetful, and completely under her influence. She isolated him from his family and convinced him that we were only after his money." The description sent chills down my spine. Confused and forgetful. Exactly the words Lillian had been using to describe me. Isolated from family. Exactly what was happening between Charlie and me. I spent another 2 hours researching, gathering every piece of information I could find about Lillian's previous marriages. The pattern was always the same. She would meet wealthy older men through dating websites or social events, marry them quickly, then begin documenting their supposed mental decline. Each husband had changed his will shortly before dying, leaving everything to his devoted young wife. When I finally left the library, I had a folder full of evidence that Lillian Crawford Henderson was likely a serial killer who specialized in murdering wealthy older men, and I was apparently her next target. But there was one crucial difference between me and her previous victims. Thanks to Martha's foresight, I had resources and information that Lillian knew nothing about. She thought she was manipulating a helpless old man with limited means. She had no idea she was dealing with someone who could fight back. The drive home gave me time to think about what I had learned. Lillian hadn't just married Charlie for his modest income and our old family house. She had married him because she believed he would inherit everything when I died. Her plan was probably to establish my mental incompetence, gain control of my assets through Charlie, then accelerate my death through the same methods she had used on her previous husbands. That afternoon, I called my family doctor, Dr. Martinez, and scheduled a complete physical exam. If Lillian was slowly poisoning me like she had probably done to the others, I needed to know what she was using and how to counteract it. "Any particular concerns, Ross?" Dr. Martinez asked when I explained that I wanted comprehensive blood work done. "I've been feeling more tired lately," I said carefully, "and Charlie's wife has mentioned that I seem forgetful sometimes. I want to make sure there's nothing serious going on." "Doctor, Martinez scheduled me for the following morning and advised me to bring a list of any medications or supplements I had been taking. That evening, I went through my medicine cabinet carefully, looking at every bottle with new suspicion. Most of the medications were prescriptions I had been taking for years: blood pressure medicine, cholesterol medication, vitamins. But there were 3 bottles I didn't remember buying. They were generic supplements, the kind you might find at any pharmacy, labeled as memory support and energy boosters. I tried to remember when I had started taking them. It had been Lillian's suggestion, about 6 months ago, after she had commented that I seemed to be slowing down. She had even offered to pick them up for me at the pharmacy, saving me a trip. I put all 3 bottles in a bag to take to Dr. Martinez. If Lillian was dosing me with something harmful, hiding it in supplements would be the perfect cover. She could even claim she was trying to help me stay healthy and alert. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Martha's folder on one side and my research about Lillian on the other. The contrast was staggering: my wife's 20-year plan to protect me and my daughter-in-law's systematic plan to destroy me. I thought about Charlie, sleeping next to a woman who had probably killed 3 men for their money. Did he know? Was he complicit? Or was he just another victim of Lillian's manipulation? The Charlie I had raised would never participate in murder, but the Charlie I saw now was distant, cold, and seemingly indifferent to my welfare. I picked up my phone and called Charlie again. This time, I had specific questions. "Dad, it's kind of late. Is everything okay? I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," I replied, "about finding a place with more supervision. How long have you and Lillian been discussing this?" "A while," he said vaguely. "She's been worried about you for months. Some of the things you've been doing, the confusion." "What kinds of things specifically?" There was a pause. "Well, like leaving the stove on and forgetting conversations we've had. Last week you called me 3 times about the same thing." I had never left the stove on, and I had never called Charlie 3 times about anything. But arguing would only confirm Lillian's narrative about my mental state. "Have you looked at any specific facilities?" I asked. "Lillian has researched some options. There's a place about an hour away that has good reviews. It's not cheap, but we could probably manage it if we sold your house." There it was, the real goal. Lillian wanted control of my house, my assets, everything I owned. She had convinced Charlie that selling my property was necessary to pay for my care, when in reality, she was probably planning to pocket the proceeds. "That's very thoughtful of both of you," I said carefully. "I appreciate you looking out for me." After I hung up, I realized that I was probably running out of time. If Lillian's pattern held, she would escalate soon. The supplements in my medicine cabinet might be just the beginning. She had probably started with small doses of something that would cause confusion and forgetfulness, building a case for my incompetence. But if I started resisting her plans, she might move to more drastic measures. I looked at the sealed letter Martha had prepared for Charlie and Lillian. Whatever my wife had written, she had intended it as a final message, something to be delivered only when I was ready to reveal everything I knew. Tomorrow, after my doctor's appointment, I would have answers about what Lillian had been giving me, and then I would have to decide how to use Martha's gift to protect not just myself, but possibly my son as well. Because if Lillian had killed 3 husbands for their money, Charlie might be in as much danger as I was. The only question was whether I could save him before it was too late, or whether he was already too deep under her influence to recognize the truth about the woman he had married. Dr. Martinez called me personally with the blood test results, which told me everything I needed to know about how serious the situation was. "Ross, I need you to come in immediately," he said, his voice tight with concern. "Your blood work shows elevated levels of several substances that shouldn't be there. I'm particularly worried about the digitalis levels. That's a heart medication that can be extremely dangerous if you're not supposed to be taking it." I drove to his office with my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to stay calm. The 3 supplement bottles sat in a bag on my passenger seat, evidence of Lillian's attempt to kill me slowly and systematically. Dr. Martinez was waiting for me when I arrived, his face grim. "Ross, someone has been giving you cardiac medication without your knowledge. Digitalis is derived from foxglove plants, and in the wrong doses, it can cause confusion, memory problems, and eventually heart failure." "How long would it take?" I asked quietly. "If someone wanted to cause a gradual decline, they could dose you over 6 to 12 months. Start with small amounts to cause cognitive symptoms, then increase the dosage until..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. I handed him the supplement bottles. My daughter-in-law bought these for me about 6 months ago. She said they would help with my memory and energy. Dr. Martinez examined the bottles carefully, then sent them to the lab for analysis. While we waited, he explained what digitalis poisoning looked like from the outside, exactly the symptoms Lillian had been describing to Charlie and anyone else who would listen. The confusion and forgetfulness would seem like natural aging or early dementia. He said, family members might genuinely believe the person needs more care or supervision. It's actually a fairly sophisticated method of manipulation. 2 hours later, the lab confirmed what we already suspected. All 3 supplement bottles contained digitalis, carefully mixed with the legitimate vitamins to mask the taste and appearance. The dosages were precisely calculated, enough to cause cognitive symptoms and gradual heart damage, but not enough to kill me quickly. "We need to call the police," Dr. Martinez said. "Not yet," I replied. "I need to protect my son first. If we move too fast, she might panic and hurt him." I drove home with a bottle of medication that would help clear the digitalis from my system and a strict warning from Dr. Martinez to avoid anything Lillian might offer me to eat or drink. I also had official documentation of the poisoning, which would be crucial evidence when the time came. That afternoon, I called a security company and arranged to have cameras installed throughout my house. I told the technician I was concerned about break-ins, but really I wanted to document any future attempts by Lillian to access my home or tamper with my food and medication. While the cameras were being installed, I used my cell phone to call the law firm that handled Martha's estate. I needed legal advice about how to proceed, and I wanted to make sure my own will was properly structured to prevent Lillian from benefiting if something happened to me. The attorney, Mr. Davidson, was shocked when I explained the situation. "Ross, if you have evidence that someone is systematically poisoning you, this is attempted murder. You need to involve law enforcement immediately." "I will," I promised. "But first, I need to make sure my son understands what's happening. He's been manipulated into believing I'm mentally incompetent. If I suddenly accuse his wife of trying to kill me, he'll think it's paranoid delusion." Mr. Davidson agreed to help me structure a plan. We would document everything carefully, gathering evidence that would be impossible for Charlie to dismiss. Then we would present him with the truth about his wife, giving him a chance to save himself before we involved the authorities. That evening, Lillian called to check on me. Her voice was sweet and concerned, exactly what you would expect from a caring daughter-in-law. "Ross, honey, how are you feeling today? Charlie mentioned you seemed a little confused when you called last night." "I'm feeling much better," I said truthfully. For the first time in months, my head was clear and my energy was returning as the digitalis worked its way out of my system. "That's wonderful. I was thinking of coming by tomorrow to bring you some soup. That homemade chicken soup you always say you love." I thought about the supplements she had been giving me for 6 months, the careful way she had built a case for my mental decline, the 3 dead husbands who had probably received similar offers of caring attention. "That's very kind of you, Lillian, but I don't want to be any trouble." "Oh, it's no trouble at all," she insisted. "Family takes care of family, right? I'll come by around noon." After I hung up, I realized this was my opportunity. With the security cameras recording, I could document Lillian attempting to poison me again. Dr. Martinez had given me a testing kit that would reveal if any food or drink contained harmful substances. I spent the evening preparing. I hid the camera recording equipment in my bedroom, made sure my cell phone was fully charged, and put Dr. Martinez's number on speed dial. If Lillian brought poisoned soup, I would have video evidence of her attempting to harm me, but I also spent time thinking about Charlie. My son had been married to a serial killer for 3 years, sharing a bed with someone who had murdered at least 3 men for money. Even if he was innocent of knowing her true nature, he was still in danger. Lillian had probably already started documenting his supposed decline, building a case for his incompetence, just like she had done with me. The next morning, I prepared for Lillian's visit carefully. I showered, dressed in clean clothes, and made sure the house looked neat and organized. I wanted the security cameras to record a competent, alert man, not the confused victim Lillian expected to find. She arrived at exactly noon, carrying a thermos of soup and wearing the same fake smile she had used at my birthday party, but something was different about her demeanor. She seemed more confident, more aggressive, like a predator who sensed her prey was finally weak enough to finish off. "Ross, you look tired," she said, setting the thermos on my kitchen counter. "Are you sleeping well?" "I'm fine, thank you." She opened the thermos and the smell of chicken soup filled the kitchen. It looked and smelled exactly like the homemade soup Martha used to make, which made Lillian's deception even more disturbing. "I made this especially for you," she said, ladling soup into a bowl. "It has all your favorite ingredients: carrots, celery, plenty of chicken, and some special herbs I thought might help with your energy." Special herbs. I watched her hands as she prepared the bowl, noting how she added something from a small packet in her purse. Whatever she was adding, it wasn't visible in the soup, but the testing kit would detect it. "This is very thoughtful," I said, accepting the bowl. "Let me just get some crackers to go with it." I walked to the pantry, using the moment to discreetly dip one of Dr. Martinez's test strips into the soup. The strip immediately changed color, indicating the presence of a toxic substance. "Ross?" Lillian called. "Is everything all right?" I returned to the kitchen with crackers, the poisoned soup still in my hands. Lillian was watching me intently, waiting for me to eat what would probably have been my last meal. "Actually, Lillian, I'm not very hungry right now," I said, setting the bowl on the counter. "Could I save this for later?" Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, but it's better when it's warm. Why don't you just have a few spoonfuls now?" "I really can't. My stomach has been upset lately." She moved closer, her voice becoming more insistent. "Ross, you need to eat. You're already too thin and Charlie is worried about your health. Just try a little bit." This was the moment the cameras would capture. Lillian Henderson pressuring her elderly father-in-law to consume food she had poisoned, knowing it would cause his death. "I appreciate the concern," I said firmly, "but I'm not eating the soup." For just a second, the mask slipped completely. Lillian's expression became cold and calculating, the look of someone whose carefully planned murder was being derailed by an uncooperative victim. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp. "But Charlie is going to hear about this. Your behavior is becoming more erratic every day, Ross. We can't keep ignoring the signs." After she left, I sealed the poisoned soup in containers for the police lab, backed up the security camera footage, and called Mr. Davidson to confirm that we had enough evidence to proceed. "This is attempted murder, Ross," he said, after I described what had happened. "You have documentation, video evidence, and physical proof. It's time to involve the authorities." "Tomorrow," I promised. "First, I need to show Charlie what kind of woman he married." That night, I opened Martha's sealed letter, addressed to Charlie and Lillian. Her final words were simple, but devastating. "If Ross is reading this to you, it means you have forgotten that love is not about control, and family is not about convenience. I pray you remember who you used to be before it's too late." Tomorrow, I would show my son the evidence that his wife was a killer. I would give him one chance to save himself before the police arrested the woman he thought he loved. And then Martha's 20-year plan to protect me would finally reach its conclusion. I called Charlie early the next morning before he left for work. My voice was steady and calm, nothing like the confused old man Lillian had been describing to him for months. "Charlie, I need you to come to my house this afternoon. Bring Lillian with you. There are some things we need to discuss as a family." "Dad, I'm really busy today. Can't this wait until the weekend?" "No, it can't wait. Be here at 4 o'clock. Both of you." Something in my tone must have convinced him, because he agreed without further argument. I spent the morning preparing for what would be the most important conversation of my life. I arranged all the evidence on my dining room table, the research about Lillian's previous husbands, the medical reports proving I had been poisoned, the video footage of her trying to feed me contaminated soup. I also placed Martha's letter prominently in the center of the table, along with the documentation of the investment that had made me wealthy beyond anything Lillian could have imagined. At exactly 4 o'clock, I heard Charlie's car in my driveway. Through the window, I watched him and Lillian walk toward my front door. She looked confident, probably expecting another opportunity to document my supposed mental decline. Charlie looked tired and distracted, like a man who was going through the motions of family obligation. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said. "We have a lot to discuss." They followed me into the dining room, where the evidence was spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that would finally reveal the complete picture. I watched Lillian's face as she took in the newspaper articles, the medical reports, the photographs of her previous husband's obituaries. Her confident expression slowly changed to something like panic. "What is all this?" Charlie asked, picking up one of the obituaries. "Sit down, both of you," I said firmly. Lillian, I think you know exactly what this is. She remained standing, her eyes darting between the documents and the exits. Ross, what kind of game are you playing here? This isn't a game. This is the truth about who you really are and what you've been doing to me for the past 6 months. I handed Charlie the medical report first. Your wife has been slowly poisoning me with heart medication hidden in vitamin supplements. Dr. Martinez confirmed it yesterday. The confusion and memory problems you've been worried about, they were caused by digitalis toxicity. Charlie stared at the medical report, his face going pale. That's impossible. Lillian would never read the whole thing, I said gently. Look at the dates, the blood test results, the analysis of the supplements she bought for me. While Charlie read, I turned to Lillian. You made one mistake. You assumed I was just another helpless old man with limited resources and no one to protect him. But my wife was smarter than you gave her credit for. I picked up Martha's letter and the investment documents. 20 years ago, Martha invested in a technology company. Those investments are now worth over $2 million. While you were planning to steal my house and whatever small savings you thought I had, I was actually wealthier than you could have imagined. Lillian's composure finally cracked. You're lying. You live in this tiny house, you drive that old car. Because I choose to live simply. Martha taught me that real wealth comes from being content with what you have, not from taking what belongs to others. Charlie looked up from the medical report, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Dad, this says someone was giving you cardiac medication without your knowledge, enough to cause heart damage. Your wife has been trying to kill me, Charlie, just like she killed Robert Crawford, James Morrison, and Donald Fletcher. I spread the obituaries and newspaper clippings across the table. 3 wealthy husbands, all dead of sudden heart problems within 2 years of marrying Lillian. All left her substantial inheritances. I'm supposed to be number 4. Charlie's hands shook as he picked up the obituaries, reading each one carefully. Lillian, tell me this isn't true. Tell me there's some explanation. But Lillian wasn't looking at her husband anymore. She was staring at me with naked hatred, all pretense of the caring daughter-in-law finally abandoned. You meddling old fool, she hissed. You couldn't just die quietly like you were supposed to. The words hung in the air like a confession. Charlie dropped the papers he was holding and stared at his wife in horror. You really did this. You've been poisoning my father. Your father is a worthless old man taking up space and resources, Lillian snapped. I was doing both of you a favor. With him gone, we could have sold this house, used the money to build a real life together. By murdering him, Charlie's voice was barely a whisper, by solving a problem efficiently, just like I solved problems for Robert, James, and Donald. They were all lonely old men who were grateful for companionship. I gave them purpose in their final months, and they gave me security. I watched my son's face as he finally understood who he had married. The color drained from his cheeks, and he looked like he might be sick. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? Since the day I met you, Lillian replied with chilling honesty. Did you really think I fell in love with a middle-aged man with a modest income and an elderly father to support? I researched your family before our first date. I knew about your father's house, his savings, the inheritance you would eventually receive. But there was no inheritance, Charlie said, looking confused. Dad doesn't have money. He does now, I said, picking up the investment statements. $2.3 million to be exact. Martha made sure I would never be helpless or dependent on anyone. Lillian's eyes widened as she saw the numbers. That's impossible. I researched you thoroughly. You live like a pauper. I live within my means. There's a difference. I turned to Charlie, who was still staring at his wife like he had never seen her before. Son, I need you to understand something. Your marriage was never real. Lillian targeted you because she thought you would inherit my assets when I died. She's been documenting my supposed mental decline for months, probably planning to have you declared my guardian so she could control my finances. The nursing home, Charlie said suddenly. She kept pushing me to look at nursing homes for you. She said it was for your own safety. It was to isolate me and accelerate the poisoning process. Once I was in a facility, she could control my medication and food more easily. The staff would assume any decline was due to natural aging. Lillian suddenly lunged toward the table, grabbing for the medical reports. These are lies, forgeries. This crazy old man is trying to frame me because he's jealous of my marriage to his son. But I was ready for her. I caught her wrist and held it firmly, my strength surprising all 3 of us. Months of digitalis poisoning had weakened me, but I was recovering quickly now that I was no longer being dosed daily. "Charlie, call 911, I said calmly. "Your wife is under arrest for attempted murder." "You can't prove anything," Lillian snarled, still struggling against my grip. "It's your word against mine, and everyone knows you're confused and forgetful." "Actually, I have video footage of you putting poison in my soup yesterday," I replied. "Plus medical evidence, plus documentation of your previous murders. The police have been very interested in reopening the cases of your former husbands." For the first time since I had known her, Lillian looked genuinely afraid. The confident predator who had been stalking me for months suddenly realized she had been outmaneuvered by her intended victim. Charlie stood frozen by the telephone, still processing the magnitude of what he had learned. "Dad, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. When she told me you were getting confused, I believed her. I thought I was helping you. You were being manipulated by an expert, Charlie. Lillian has been perfecting this technique for years." The sound of sirens in the distance told me that Charlie had finally made the call. Within minutes, my house would be filled with police officers, paramedics, and investigators. Lillian would be arrested, charged, and eventually convicted for the attempted murder of 4 men. But looking at my son's devastated face, I realized that justice was only part of what needed to happen here. Charlie would need time to heal from the betrayal, to understand that he had been as much a victim as I was. "Charlie," I said gently, "after the police finish here, I want you to stay for dinner. We have a lot to talk about, and I think it's time you learned about your mother's gift to both of us." He nodded, tears streaming down his face as the police cars pulled into my driveway. The investigation that followed would take months, but the healing between my son and me could begin tonight. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my small house, preparing dinner for Charlie and his new girlfriend, Sarah. The morning newspaper lay open on the counter, featuring a small article about Lillian's sentencing. She had been convicted of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, receiving life in prison without possibility of parole. The investigation had revealed even more than I had discovered on my own. Lillian had killed 5 husbands, not 3. 2 earlier deaths in other states had been reopened based on the evidence from my case. She had stolen over $4 million from elderly men who had trusted her with their hearts and their lives. But that was yesterday's news. Today was about the future that Martha had made possible with her 20-year plan. Charlie knocked on my door at exactly 6 o'clock, just like he used to do when he was a child coming home for Sunday dinner. He looked healthier now, more like the son I remembered before Lillian's influence had changed him. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and he was slowly rebuilding his sense of trust in himself and others. "Dad, this is Sarah," he said, introducing the woman beside him. She was about his age, a teacher at the local elementary school, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Nothing like the calculating predator he had been married to. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, shaking my hand warmly. "Charlie talks about you all the time." We sat down to dinner at the same table where I had once spread evidence of Lillian's crimes. Now it was set with Martha's good china, the plates she had saved for special occasions. Every meal with my son felt special now. "How's the new job going?" I asked Charlie. He had left his old company and started working for a non-profit that provided legal services to elderly people who couldn't afford attorneys. It was lower paying than his previous work, but infinitely more satisfying. "It's amazing," he replied, his face lighting up. "Last week we helped an elderly woman whose grandson was trying to steal her social security checks. The week before that, we stopped a contractor from overcharging a widower for unnecessary home repairs." I smiled, remembering Martha's letter and her hope that Charlie would remember who he used to be. The son sitting across from me now was the man she had raised, the boy who used to bring injured birds home for us to heal. "Speaking of which," Charlie continued, "I have something to ask you." He looked nervous, which made me curious. "What is it?" "The non-profit is expanding and they need someone to help train volunteers about recognizing elder abuse, someone who's been through it and can speak from experience. They asked me to ask you if you'd be interested." I considered the request. For months after Lillian's arrest, I had been angry about the 3 years of my life she had stolen, the relationship with Charlie she had damaged, the fear and confusion she had caused. But gradually, that anger had transformed into something more productive. "I'd be honored," I said. "Martha always believed that our experiences, even the painful ones, could be used to help other people." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's exactly what Charlie said you would say." After dinner, Charlie and I sat on my front porch while Sarah helped clean up inside. It had become our tradition, these quiet conversations at the end of the evening. The porch overlooked the small garden I had planted with some of Martha's favorite flowers. The investment income made it possible for me to hire help with the yard work, but I still liked to plant and tend the flowers myself. Dad, can I ask you something I've been wondering about for months? Of course. How did Mom know? How did she predict that something like this might happen? I had thought about that question many times. Your mother was wise about people, Charlie. She saw how money could change relationships, how it could bring out the worst in people who seemed trustworthy. She also knew that as I got older, I might become vulnerable to manipulation. But she couldn't have known about Lillian specifically. No, but she knew that someone might come along who would see me as a target. Martha understood that the best defense against predators was to make sure I had resources and options they didn't know about. Charlie was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I still can't believe I was married to a murderer for 3 years. How could I not see what she was? Because she was very good at what she did, and because you're a trusting person. That's not a flaw, Charlie. That's one of your best qualities. But I let her convince me that you were losing your mind. I participated in her plan to isolate you. You were protecting someone you loved from someone you thought was confused and possibly dangerous. That shows good instincts, not bad ones. We had this conversation, variations of this conversation, many times over the past year. Charlie was still processing the guilt and shame of having been deceived so completely, but gradually he was learning to forgive himself. Sarah seems wonderful, I said, changing the subject to something more positive. Charlie's face brightened. She is. She knows everything about Lillian, about what happened, and she's not afraid. She says it shows I'm capable of deep loyalty, even when it's misguided. Smart woman. Dad, there's something else I want to tell you. Sarah and I have been talking about marriage. I felt a surge of happiness, mixed with protectiveness. How do you feel about that? Terrified, he admitted with a laugh, but also excited. Sarah is nothing like Lillian. She's independent, honest, and she actually likes you. That is a significant improvement. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Inside the house I could hear Sarah humming while she finished cleaning the kitchen. It was a sound Martha would have loved, the sound of family life continuing, of love and trust being rebuilt. Charlie, I want to show you something. I went inside and returned with Martha's investment portfolio. Over the past year, the technology stocks had continued to grow in value. The portfolio was now worth nearly $3 million. This is all going to be yours someday, I said, handing him the statements. But I want you to understand what your mother intended when she created this. Charlie looked at the numbers, still amazed by the magnitude of what Martha had accomplished. She wanted to protect you. She wanted to protect both of us, you and me, and any future generations of our family. This money isn't just about security. It's about freedom. The freedom to help others, to take risks on meaningful work, to choose love over convenience. Like the non-profit job. Exactly. You can afford to do work that matters because your mother made sure money would never control your choices. A year ago, Charlie had been married to a woman who saw relationships as financial transactions, who measured love in terms of inheritance and control. Now he was building a life with someone who understood that real wealth came from connection, purpose, and the ability to sleep peacefully at night. Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of how this all turned out? I looked at my son, healthy and happy, and choosing to dedicate his life to protecting vulnerable people. I thought about the letter Martha had written, expressing her hope that Charlie would remember who he used to be. I think she would be amazed by how much you've grown this past year, and I think she would love Sarah. As Charlie and Sarah prepared to leave, I stood at my front door watching them walk to their car. They held hands naturally, comfortable with each other in a way that Charlie and Lillian never had been. Their relationship was built on honesty and mutual respect, not manipulation and calculation. After they drove away, I went back inside and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and Martha's original letter. I had read it dozens of times over the past year, but tonight I noticed something I had missed before. At the very end, in tiny handwriting, Martha had added a postscript. Ross, if you're reading this, it means you're stronger than whoever tried to break you. Use that strength to help others find theirs. I smiled, understanding finally that Martha's gift had never been just about the money. It had been about giving me the tools to discover my own resilience. my own capacity to fight back against injustice and protect the people I loved. Tomorrow I would start training volunteers to recognize elder abuse. Next month, Charlie and Sarah would announce their engagement. Next year, maybe there would be grandchildren who would grow up hearing stories about their grandmother's wisdom and their grandfather's courage. The house felt peaceful around me, filled with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a future full of possibilities. Outside, Martha's flowers bloomed in the garden, a reminder that love, like courage, could take root anywhere and grow stronger with time. I turned off the lights and headed to bed, carrying with me the knowledge that Martha's 20-year plan had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. She had protected me from harm, yes, but more importantly, she had given me the chance to become the man she always believed I could be. The cheap watch Lillian had given me for my birthday sat in a drawer upstairs, a memento of the night everything changed. But on my wrist now was Martha's watch, the one she had worn for 40 years of marriage. It kept perfect time, just like her love had, steady and reliable and built to last. Tonight, for the first time since Martha's death, I felt truly at peace. Justice had been served, family had been restored, and the future held nothing but promise. Martha's final gift had been the gift of hope itself, and I intended to spend whatever years remained to me proving worthy of her faith in my strength. The old man who had been humiliated at his birthday party was gone, replaced by someone who understood his own worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. And somewhere, I like to think, Martha was smiling at the man her love had helped me become.